So let's talk about it real quick. I just saw the Ab and Preach conversation about just pearly things and yeah, when you don't have context in your little review of someone's video and you only review literally not even 15 seconds and two talking points that she said and you did that. Now, disclaimer, all the tap dancing and buffooning that the Manosphere was doing for just pearly things last week was disgusting. Like that was terrible. Like that was not a good look for the black manosphere and their white woman king. But besides that, in defense of just pearly things. So she's not saying anything that hasn't been said before, that hasn't been established in the red pill community. I know all these arguments and all these things are just being rehashed and redone from 10, 15 years ago, and people have monetized it. Some people started doing it back then, but it's really a bag now. It wasn't as much back then. But if you really think about it, and I could do a comparison, the same way girls' rights was Karen Strong's, and also whatever her name is, Badger, anti-feminist white women, they were elevated in a men's right red pill space because they said some of the male talking points and they defended men's rights and they were anti-feminists. Well, flash forward to today, 15, 20 years later, you have this Pearly Things who's also flash forward in front of the male dominated group and is doing well in that space. But cut that off. She's not saying nothing new, nothing different. But Sarah said something about this in a different video, in a different context, about the Ethiopian and the Haitian dudes in Black American conversations. I would piggyback off that and saying like they're two Canadians by proxy. One's from Haiti and the other one's from I guess Somalia or whatever, I don't know. But they're not American and they're giving their take and their perspective on American commentary. And you can't do that without the context. Shout out to Girls' Rights Watch, aka Karen Strongs, but she was breaking this down a long time ago. The breakdown between the suffragettes and the suffragists, and how the suffragists were racist white women who were racist and classist. They didn't want black men to vote. They damn sure didn't want black women or lower other groups. They didn't even want poor white women to vote either. But they wanted access. They didn't like the gains that black men were making, blah, blah, blah. But one of the points she made in that little clip was about the right to vote. And the suffragists, you can Google and make sure I'm getting them those two right, but the suffragettes didn't want a right to vote because they believed that they would have the responsibilities that men would have too, i.e. the draft. That's why people bring up that example. That's been an MRA red pill talking point for the last 15, 20 years. But again, how could you, that's context you should know before you speak on the topic to say she sounds crazy, because it's not crazy. It's something that's been said before and this actual argument has been made plenty of times. Just like simple 18-year-olds used to have to go to war because 19-year-olds could vote and 18-year-olds couldn't. And 18, 19, 21-year-olds can vote to send the 18-year-olds to war. And the 18-year-olds are like, no, hell no. Like, we need the right to vote too if we get to die and our lives are going to go. Likewise, if women are getting to be 51% of the vote in the population and they get to do things to send the other gender to war, then likewise, the women should have that same responsibility. I.e., the point of what she was saying in the whole context is women getting rights without equal responsibility. Again, context matters before you rebuke or say she sound crazy or say she sound outlandish. It's just that simple. Also, when it comes to the birth control pill, again, they're Canadians by proxy, and culturally, we don't know. And it's weird too, because like most Black American content creators, we don't dabble and pontificate on other group stuff like that. Like we have our own issues and identity crisis here, but we really don't speak about that stuff. I learn and want to listen to see what's going on. For example, Canada, right? We're talking about that. They don't have a Second Amendment. They don't have a First Amendment. I have a lot to say about that, but that's their culture. They're cool with it. I remember watching, what's his name? The dude who do all the documentaries, the liberal dude, but he did the one about healthcare in Canada, right? And I'm, listening to all the conservative talking points and all this other stuff. And I'm like, no, I want to hear from the Canadians themselves. Now, I didn't believe that you can interview 100 people and they all say the same thing, because you can't get that here in America. You're going to get a different perspective and opinion from actually 10 different people. But nevertheless, they all say, yeah, we like our system, but they voice the same thing. oh, the wait times, certain surgeries we can't get, we have to go to America, blah, blah, blah. But overall, they like that system there. They're cool with that. I've worked with dudes that, because I lived near the Canadian border, I've had dudes come from Canada that were Canadian companies in America, and sometimes they had to bring their guys up to do certain things, and then we would talk about this stuff, and it's a whole different um culture. And they both said, despite the money and all that, that they like it. And one thing I did, I talked to a female who's a nurse in Toronto, which cost of living is crazy. It's comparable to New York City, but she basically admitted that it's not worth it being a nurse in Toronto. Now in New York City, our governor Urban Jazz just gave them a 7,000 raise because she, in the middle of a pandemic, decided to fire 77,000 nurses because they wouldn't get the jabby. But that was just stupid on her part. But she just gave them a raise to whatever, and then they sued, and a lot of them are gonna get paid and get their jobs back. Shout out to the Supreme Court for that. But in America, it's worth being a nurse. In Canada, for the most part, the ones I talked to said it's not. But I'm just saying, there's context there to why I can't just shit on, oh, why would you want to go there? Why would you want to be taxed at that rate? And blah, blah, blah. No, like some of them are cool with that because that's part of their culture and they're good with that. But that was my point, is that you can't just have these critiques without having some context, yo. Like what he said, well, if you show this to a random person in a different part of the world, like in Somalia, do women have the rights that they have here in America? Are they really going to be surprised that an American said that? In Africa, if what they said or saying, do women have the same rights and access to voting and all education, all that stuff? Like Saudi Arabia, like what do you mean if you showed this somewhere else in the world and they're gonna be, no, they're not. They're gonna be surprised that she even on TV talking like she talking, right? Context matters. Before you go pooping on American conversations and saying people are crazy and outlandish and using this example to say, oh, the red pill is crazy. Like, no, add the context to it. Nothing she said was new. Nothing she said isn't not been a debate in this culture, in this country. Yes, and as far as the abortion pill goes, obviously the Supreme Court feels the same way she's doing because there's a couple people in there who would do what she's doing. But ironically, she said, if I was queen of the day, not of the manosphere, not the white woman queen, but she said if it was pros wars were her exact words, I know it's not going to happen, were also her exact words, but I would do away with the abortion pill. Now, think about what that means. We can pinpoint in American history when the dynamics and the culture shifted and changed. Some people say it wasn't the 1960s, it was the generations before that. It was the grandparents who was walling out that raised these badass kids that grew up in the 60s or whatever. But nonetheless, we know culturally what that pill did to our society and what it did to sexual relationships and marriage and all other stuff. A lot of stuff happened, a lot of things changed in our culture after that pill was invented. Now you can say it was for the good or for the worse or it had good intentions, but there were still negative externalities that affected our society for the negative from having that pill. White women use abortion as a tool to negotiate with white men for the same way that suffragists did what they did to try to get access to the wealth and the power of white men. So they couldn't do that without having other women buy into the same situation, though. They couldn't have a bunch of minorities and black women having a bunch of babies being fruitful and multiplying while they're doing their thing. So they had to convince the black women to do the same thing too. But that being said, what she said about that is not crazy. It's not far-fetched. It's not mind-blowing. It's not that deep. Y'all more liberal and feminist thinking in y'all views. So I understand why they feel some type of way about her saying that. But for people who study American history and they know certain things happened in our culture that changed it for the worse, and the abortion pill was one of those things, it ain't crazy that she said that. It ain't far-fetched that she said that. It ain't something, I got your moment, if you know what I mean? Like, we know what happened here. We know when that pill was invented, what it did to marriages, what it did to relationships, what it did to family structure, what it did to the lack of responsibility in women, right? And again, that was also her point, is these were they were cheat codes to get women to get access to things without bearing the responsibility of those things. Women take the pill or not, boom, men still responsible. If the kid comes, he's still responsible for taking care of that kid, whether she was on it, whether she wasn't. it is what it is. But women were getting away with being responsible for being sexually irresponsible. This little pill helped that. But what it didn't stop STDs. It didn't stop, it didn't stop them from getting pregnant. They still were getting pregnant because the little slimy things that Planned Parenthood was doing with giving little girls just enough so that they won't get pregnant, but they could get pregnant every now and then, and they can come in and have to pay for a deletion. Um, yeah, a lot of fucked up shit happened with that pill. But again, Abba and Preach, Canadians speaking on American things without context is just dumb. It doesn't sound far fetched to me. It doesn't. It's not crazy. And I know there's a bunch of other countries where they don't really respect women having the right to vote, and they're not for the pill, right? There's the African. You saw the video of the African lady arguing with the white liberal progressive, trying to tell her what African needs is more Depo-Provera and more birth control. And she's like, no, we don't need that. We need school education. We need resources. We need math, science, and arithmetics, not your poison pills that are destroying our bodies and messing us up and making us barren. That's not what we need. We don't want to be in a situation like you in America where you're not having enough children, you're not reproducing yourself, and you're losing economic power. We don't want that. You know what I mean? So, yeah, context matters, Ab and Preach. Don't speak on things like that without context. It's not crazy that she said that. It's not far-fetched. We're not, people today, the millennials, because they grew up not understanding those contexts, not doing the research, not studying. But again, girls' rights was before just pearly things, and she's debated and argued these things 10, 15 years ago on YouTube. And her videos are still up there. I was trying to find a clip of her specifically talking about the suffragists and suffragettes and what they did. There's more Honey Badger, she has her videos up there that are more up to date, and I don't know, she breaks it down a little bit better, but she's not on camera doing it. But Girls Rights Watch has been very vocal in breaking down the draft thing and what women were doing and what the suffragists were doing, how they were shaming men and tarring, feathering dudes who didn't go to the draft. Like, wait a minute, you can vote to send me to war, but you don't have to deal with this. Like, it's not that for now. In essence, the draft isn't a bad thing, being that it would force wealthy and middle class people to go to. I'm sure there are people who obviously draft dodged and got away with it, Trump, different presidents, whatever. But I'm saying in general, the draft it makes more sense because it would force everybody to have to go. And you couldn't just, especially now with the transparency and the reporting and things all being, it ain't gonna be like how in Vietnam it was a bunch of black men specifically going to the front lines and just getting slaughtered. You can't get away with that no more. But this is my video. When Sarge said that about him talking about black relationships, and you got a biracial chick shitting on black dudes, and you got this dude who's Canadian by proxy of Ethiopia, speaking on these topics, but don't know the cultural context of these things. Like, you just sound dumb when you do that, because you should want to learn and figure out why those things are being said, and then it would make sense, right? That's my video. I'm out.